Hello. The Divine Code reading for October 13th, pages 255 and also page 20. We're finishing up the chapter, The Prohibition of Swearing or Vowing in the Name of an Idol. And with finishing this up, we're also finishing up the unit on the prohibition of idolatry. Topic number 11. In the future messianic era and the world to come, the occupation of the whole world will be solely to know God. Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 9. As it says, well, this is also quoted in Rambam, The Laws of Kings 12:2. For when I, that's God is speaking, when I will turn the people to a pure language, so that all will call upon the name of God to serve him with one purpose. And all will know, that's the end of the quote, and all will know that God alone exists, and there is no other divinity aside from him that it is fitting to rely upon. Rather, all will depend on God alone, as the prophet says. Zechariah 14, verse 9. God will be king over the entire earth. In that day, God will be one, and his name one. This means that even his name will be one and exclusive in the mouths of all, and there will be no belief in any other existence, even as an intermediary. As it says in Deuteronomy 4, verse 39, and you shall know this day and take to your heart that the Lord alone is God. In the heavens above and on the earth below, there is no other. So as this is speaking of how it'll be in the future, we'll realize that God is the soul. And all the other beliefs that exist today, that have existed through time, the beliefs in idol, in all their deities, and the beliefs in intermediaries, it'll be like you're in a dark room. Today is like we're in a dark room. And we don't really see things, and we get weird ideas about how the room is based upon the best we can figure it out. And that's where idolatry and intermediaries come into play. In the Messianic era, and especially in the world to come, in the Messianic era, the light will be turned on in the room. And all of a sudden we'll see that everything comes from God. There is no other powers. There is no intermediaries. There is only God. In the world to come, we will actualize the functioning based on that understanding. The Messianic era, we will have the understanding and will be operating towards that. In the world to come, we'll actually be functioning with the awareness that God is all that there is. But for right now, we seek this knowledge. We seek to have an awareness of, even though we're in the world today where the lights are off, and we're groping about trying to figure out how to get through life, and people figure out all sorts of bizarre things that seem to make sense to them. And we are seeking after, through the knowledge of Torah, we are seeking after an awareness of what is reality, what it'll be like when the lights are turned on during the Messianic era, and everyone will just see the way it is. We have the ability to function with that today, and that's the Torah, and it's available to the nations if the nations desire to pursue this. The next page is when we go into a new unit in the Divine Code, it starts on the right side of the page is where the table of contents and that are. And so, just the way it's laid out, that leaves a blank page. Sometimes it leaves a blank page, depending on when the other unit ends. So in this case, at the end of the book of idolatry, or the section on idolatry, we have a blank page on the left-hand side, and then the right-hand side of the next daf, the next leaf of the book, starts the new unit. So in this case, the daily reading inserts a page from an earlier part of the book in the editor's preface. And the first part is discussing the history, world history, with regards to the Noahide movement through in world history. And page 20, which is part of this world history, is discussing the time from Mount Sinai through up until the destruction of the second temple, up until the earlier part of the Roman era. The top of page 20. At that time, and that's a reference to the time of the revelation at Mount Sinai, the voice of God, the name of God, and the unity of God were openly revealed. So this awareness that occurs at the time of the Messianic era, that awareness was open at the time of the revelation at Mount Sinai. The lights were turned on for that brief time. But God, in his wisdom, saw it better to withhold from the individuals of the witnessing nation, the Jewish people, the ability to continue living with the intensity of the revelation. So that having the lights on at the time of Mount Sinai, the revelation of how the world really exists, was of such an intensity that it would not have been humanity and the Jewish people and all the rest of the humanity as well were not at a stage where they were able to handle it. And so God briefly showed them this, what will be available in the Messianic, and especially in the world to come, but in the Messianic era, this revelation will be available. It was briefly available at Mount Sinai, and then it was diminished because of the difficulty that it would be at that time to handle the revelation. He appointed Moshe in Hebrew, as his prophet to receive and transmit all of his commandments for the future generations. See Deuteronomy 21 and 28 through chapter 21 through chapter 28. This includes the recording of God's encapsulation of his divine wisdom into written words, which can be absorbed and integrated within the limited human mind. This document, the 5 books of Moses, God called the Torah, which means instruction. And he bequeathed it, along with its exclamations, to the Jews as an eternal inheritance. Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 4. Along with this gift came the entrusting of a great responsibility, because the Torah does not only specify the 613 Jewish commandments, of which the 10 commandments are only a fraction. It also contains the 7 Noahide commandments for all non-Jews, which God commanded to Noah 16 generations earlier. So the Torah, the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the beginning of the Bible, the first 5 books of the Bible, includes all of this information that is of value to humanity. The 613 commandments given to the Jewish people, 7 commandments given to the rest of humanity. This is something that humans can handle. Humans cannot handle, or could not handle at that time, and still have difficulty being able to handle today, the open revelation. The open revelation would wipe people out, which is what happened at Sinai. This is a enclosed revelation that comes through these commandments. With the ascent of the Jews to nationhood in the land of Israel, the surrounding nations, and especially the peoples from those nations who chose to take up residence in the Holy Land, returned to an awareness of the 7 Noahide commandments. As the Jews encountered national success and failures during the 440 years preceding and the 410 years following the construction of the first Holy Temple by King Solomon, the appeal of the Noahide Code among the surrounding nations waxed and waned. So as the Jewish people, as Israel gained in stature, it became of value to the nations around them, and especially for the people who chose to come to Israel, to the nations, the non-Jews who desired to live in Israel, but also the surrounding nations. There was a desire to follow the 7 laws, to live in a godly manner. When Israel was going through times of difficulty, then the nations were not so interested. That was the history for those 850 years. During the time of the Second Holy Temple, 350 before the Common Era to 70 of the Common Era, a large movement of God-fearers was active in the Roman Empire. These are Gentile adherents to the one God of Israel who directed their religious loyalty to the Jewish sages and the Holy Temple. It is nearly impossible to find any unbiased sources of the subject outside of the Talmud and Midrash, because after the temple's destruction, these Torah-observant Gentiles became prime targets of the enforcers of the pagan Roman religion, and later the missionizing activities of innovative new religions, which began to vie for the divinely appointed authority of the Torah tradition. The best non-Torah historical accounts of the God-fearers are found in the writings of Josephus. As Josephus, the Jewish War, 2, 454 and 463, and 745, Jewish Antiquities 14, 110, and 20, 41, and against Apion 1, 166, 167, and 2, 282. So there was a large, in the time of the Second Temple, in the time of the early Roman Empire, up until the destruction of the Second Temple, there was a desire upon the nations, upon especially the people in the Roman Empire, a desire to get involved with the Torah, to follow the 7 laws. These people were called the God-fearers, and a large part of the Roman Empire fit into the category of what's called the God-fearers. And what happened with these God-fearers, they, after the destruction of the temple, they sort of disappeared. And there's a lot of questions about that. One idea, according to Rabbi Chaim Dov Rabinowitz, who's a respected historian, as explained, it was orally explained to Rabbi Zeb Leff, and then Rabbi Zeb Leff orally explains it in his teachings. One understanding is that when the destruction of the temple occurred and there was exile, there was concern that the Jewish people would not be able to handle the influx of the non-Jews. That were not strong enough after the destruction of the Second Temple and the exile, and therefore there was a threat that the Jewish people would become absorbed by the non-Jews, and therefore God decreed that the God-fearers would separate from the Jewish people. And therefore they created a parallel religion at that time. At the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, there was a parallel religion that sort of went off from Judaism. And that is where the non-Jews went. The God-fearers went into that new religion that was being formed at that time. And that's eventually took over Western civilization. If those people had kept themselves attached to the Jewish people, it would have sunk the Jewish people. The Jewish people would have assimilated into it, and they would have overwhelmed the Jewish people. Therefore, in order to keep the Jewish people safe, God separated the two groups. And the theory is that when the Messianic era occurs, the Jewish people will be strong again at that time and will be able to handle the reinflux of the Noahides. And we're seeing that today. And may it be soon that the temple is rebuilt and the Mashiach is revealed, and the Jewish people will be strong once again to include the non-Jews with them. Thank you.